Good evening. Welcome back to the series. Probably a slightly different video to start with this time, because I think I'm going to change the style that I've been doing these slightly. So I'll try and remember to put something in the video to make it easy to skip past this if it's not interesting, but hopefully I'm quick. The reason for this change is I screwed up the last recording, and I programmed for like an hour or so, got to the end and realised I think I'd recorded like the first 2 minutes, and then I'd clearly clicked the wrong button and stopped the recording without realising. All very annoying in the past now, but at first I was a bit annoyed because I was like, I thought one of the benefits of this was that it was kind of showing the full process and everything you went through, kind of learning how to do these things. I think I'm basing the idea that might be interesting on, I think I learned a lot watching Soding streams, and that's kind of his style, is he just shows all of the things. But I then kind of paused. I was like, I don't want to redo that chunk, so I'm not going to like revert it and redo it. I was like, okay, well, I'll just say what I did in the next video. And I don't know, it made me stop and think about it a little bit. Like, is that the best? Am I doing this in the best way possible? And do you know what? I think I'm going to kind of split into two chunks. So I think it's better for me, and it might be better as a viewer. So better for me is, I currently, I'm a dad. I have a small baby. Comes with a lot of family obligations. Obviously, I work a full-time job, and that comes with a lot of obligations. Various other like personal commitments at the minute. Just means life's busy. And something I've noticed recently, I've got time to do programming, as a hobby, but I don't reliably have guaranteed blocks of free time. Right, like I can reliably get probably a couple of hours a day if I don't watch TV or I don't play video games. Right, other things I might do in my free time. But it's likely that it'll be broken up, right, by other obligations. So I might sit down knowing I've got a bit of free time now, but I can't guarantee it's for an hour or for 2 hours. It's likely to be interrupted. If you've watched much of the series, I think you might have noticed this happens, that I have to run away suddenly. And I found it's making it off-putting to make the videos. Whereas if I just do the programming, and then I have to find a free 20 minutes to make a video, I think that's much more doable. So I might try that for a while, see how that goes. The other thing I was thinking is, I think it also means that videos should probably be made at kind of interesting checkpoints where a thing has been done, or like a distinct point in progress has been made. And actually that might be more interesting as a viewer, kind of, again, putting myself in a viewer's shoes, imagining myself watching somebody else's videos. I'm going to have a look and see if I can do like tags on GitHub or something, so that it'll be really easy if you watch a video and think that thing was interesting and I'd like to know the details, to jump in and see the full state of the code base at that point in time. If you watch the video and then you go and run it, you can see like how I was running and building things. I think in hindsight, actually, I think this is something Casey Muratori did with his Handmade Hero series. If I remember right, I think he used to like release a zip of like the state of the project at each point. Honestly, when I watched the videos, I think I was just skimming through them. I didn't go through it in that much detail, but I can imagine, right, if I maybe was following along more live, or I was more invested at the time, that could have been quite interesting and valuable to me. So I think the value in this series is probably very different than his. He was coming at it as a very experienced game programmer, a seasoned system, whereas I'm coming at it as a kind of learning programmer, right? I'm a professional web developer, but all of this is quite outside of my normal comfort zone. And so I guess what you would get out of it is probably very different, right? I think you can reliably go to watch Casey Muratori's videos to see a really good way to do this. I'm hoping what this series of videos documents is the process that I've gone through to learn this, and maybe kind of to show that it's doable. or the whole thing falls on its face and it shows that it's really hard. But either way, to kind of make an honest journal. At first I thought that made more sense as video showing the whole process, but I guess reflecting on it a little bit, if I can condense those chunks down into like 10 to 15 minutes, it's more likely more people would actually sit through those. And you know, if in the future the channel grows slightly and you get to a place where I could reliably say stream and have a consistent audience, I think the first set of videos I did, I started streaming, and actually streaming to 0 to 1 people is really awkward. You end up missing all of the messages. There's not enough of an audience for people to talk to each other, so you have to keep stopping, or you just ignore them, which I think in practice is what I was doing. But I could see that being fun to do in the future, right? And then you could imagine these two styles of video sort of coming together. But as it is, series is small fry, right? So this is a relatively light touch way. I think it fits into my life easily. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully it works well. If it doesn't, I can always change back. But yeah, I guess that's the update. Onto the stuff I've done. Launch the game. So there's no actual changes to the game code that gets run. It is code that gets run. There's no change to what we're drawing. So if I go run our run command, like it's still running the same guff. What has changed is that I'm now also generating a font atlas. So if this build directory gets generated by that run, you can see now we have a bunch of stuff coming out of here. If I go open one of them, right, so that one's got the number 1 in it. What's changed is I'm now drawing a font atlas from a TTF file as part of render initialization. So if I go to my renderer, this file, if you followed this at all, you'll have seen lots of inside of init renderer. One of the first things it does, it takes a list of characters. So these are the characters that are going to be in our font atlas. Anything that's not in this list will just not be available to draw. And then for each font texture in a list, which currently has Ubuntu and Ubuntu Mono, which have corresponding TTF files in the assets directory. Oopsie daisy. For each of those fonts, I call this create font atlas, and then that generates, I guess, like the image asset in memory along with a load of data that's useful. And then just for debugging sake, I have that dumping to a file. So all of the characters get written, like the atlas, you can imagine, like the whole thing with all of the characters in it gets written to a file. And then just to check my bounding boxes and stuff are correct, I've also got this character debug. So I'm printing a bunch of random characters. Semi-random. So a letter, a number, a capital letter, I don't know, just seemed covering bases. And then I think like at and hash, I think are like bigger characters, like, or quite like pixel dense characters, a way to see how that looked. And then kind of a character that's not drawn, but a character that's got distinct parts to it. Because I know that TTF files basically encode the shape of the thing in a bunch of Bezier curves. So this, I guess, is a harder thing to draw than just the single character. So, and they all draw fine, right? I don't know if that's interesting enough to go see. Maybe it is. Grab inside of go so to the build. You can see here. So these are the like the full atlases, and yeah, you can see the individual characters getting drawn. So the not monospaced version and the monospaced version. If you're very eagle-eyed, you might notice the monospaced ones aren't all the same width, and that's because the bounding boxes are tight to the character, which is a deliberate choice. I don't know if it's a good choice, but it's a choice. As far as how that's being done, I landed on using STB TrueType. So I'm trying to remember if I talked about this in the last video. I think I did. But there's a bunch of ways to do this. I think FreeType 2 is the kind of like standard, really like fully featured, handle all font formats, singing and dancing, perfect implementation. Honestly, what put me off, I think I vaguely remember seeing a Soding video where he played with it and it was a pain to build. And I don't know, for fun programming, working out how to build a big library just didn't sound like a good time. I had a look at a thing called Font Stash, mostly because the Odin compiler vendors it in. I didn't look at their source at all. I just saw, I think, that the GitHub repository's been archived. And I think the first line of it says it's built on top of STB TrueType. So I was like, it's probably just doing the same thing I would do. I don't know, seeing the thing that's archived. So like STB TrueType hasn't had very many commits for a long time, but it's set out to do quite a well-defined and simple thing. So I guess it's not like that's been abandoned and archived. It's just kind of finished, so he stopped doing stuff on it. Whereas this sounded like it was unfinished and not being worked on. I don't know. I figured if I'm going to hit a thing in somebody else's code that doesn't do what I want it to do, I'm just making more work for myself. And what I want to do is quite simple. So I've gone all the way down to using STB TrueType. I don't know. I can step through this slightly. But I guess the important things, you pass in the size of your font in pixels. I guess there's some stuff in this that I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do with. But I'm guessing that what I'll do is this outputs you a grayscale bitmap. So what you get is a value from 0 to 255 showing like how on each pixel is. I think what I'll try and do is find like a threshold value that I consider to be on and then treat them as just kind of like on or off. So you give me a color and my shader will draw in the on tiles that color and in the off tiles it's transparent. We'll see how that looks. Because I'm using nearest neighbor filtering for my texture sampling. We're going for a kind of blocky, pixelated look, partly to, I guess, hide lack of art assets as much as anything else. So I think that should fit the vibe, and if it doesn't, we'll revisit. But it kind of means this font size thing is, I think, slightly arbitrary. So I don't know. We'll pick a number. We'll generate an atlas. We'll see how that looks scaled up and scaled down in the app. And if it looks bad, we'll come back. It might end up being we end up generating several font atlases at different sizes if we find that ends up making things work better. Yeah, no, I haven't thought about it too much. Ascent, descent, and line gap are all stuff about the font itself, which tells you about the sort of vertical properties of the font. So as you're drawing it to the screen, you're going to need these things. And then I guess similar to that, if I go up to here, glyph info has the horizontal values. So advanced width and left side bearing are about how far to move the cursor the next letter, like to move past this character, and how far to move the cursor from its current position to where the bounding box of this particular character starts. Those vertical and horizontal values, STB TrueType's header has good explanations for all of them, so I won't go into the detail of them. But essentially, they all tell you, given the tight bounding box around the character itself, how do I get to the bottom of that bounding box from where the like quote unquote cursor position is? And how do I then set the cursor position to the next character's place? Which I think means we're going to end up doing a bunch of maths in our like string drawing. Obviously, we're thinking of making a kind of like, at least in the first instance, a kind of ASCII based roguelike dungeon crawler, which means that we're not always going to be writing strings. We're also going to be putting characters into tiles. And in that case, this is why I thought the bounding box was the best way to go. Is I might want to actually place it in a way that doesn't make any sense for placing it within a line of text. It's kind of just a graphic, right? So I figured if I put all that stuff into glyph info, the font atlas generates out an image, which is the thing that I'm writing to file. In reality, it's going to be used to generate a texture that's sent to the GPU. A character map that contains the bounding box info. I can then look up for a given code point. So these will typically be like an ASCII value. I'm allowing for it to be kind of any UTF-8 encoded rune is the Odin type for that. I think in practice that's kind of a U32 assumed to be a UTF-8 character. So this can handle things, or in theory at least, can handle things. I haven't tested it that aren't ASCII, but let's wait and see if we bother using it. I figured it's useful to hold on to the font info in case we want to use kerning, which is about tweaking the separation between characters based upon which pairs of characters we have, which should make strings look nicer. We can look into that. And the font file data, I think I need to hold on to because we allocate a load of memory for it. We may need to free that memory. I think in the current version of this, just at render initialization, I set all of this up. You can imagine if the game gets significantly bigger and more complicated, you may want to be able to like turn these on and off at runtime. In which case we want to free this memory, and we then need a handle for it. I think the font info has pointers into this data, so these two are kind of tied together, I think. Trying to remember if there's anything particularly interesting in this file, but just kind of skim it. I write the kind of arguments that I'm setting into here. We allocate out memory for the glyph info. We read in the file for the font file. So this is your TTF file that you're reading in. We allocate out memory for the output sort of font atlas image. This scale business is mildly annoying. I don't know if I'm actually going to need it, but basically, if maybe it is needed. If you want to talk about the font that you're drawing, like pixel quantities, which feels like the easiest thing to do, you have to use this to pull out like the correct factor to times everything by to turn it from whatever the default in the TTF world is into those values. So you can see here we have to do all of this like annoying scaling. I wrote a very thin wrapper for some of the functions as well, just to make use. I think I've done this in a few places where Odin allows for multiple return values, so you can avoid using in-out variables, particularly with the named return values. I find this very neat. So putting the named return values in here kind of initializes them to their 0 value. So this is equivalent to writing ascent : = 0, descent : = 0, line gap : = 0, and then passing those references in. And then the empty return is the same as like putting them all in there. So just a little Odin-ism that I think is quite nice. Then this X and Y business is about actually laying out the font atlas. A lot of this is, I wouldn't say stolen, kind of broadly converted from an example I found that was written in C. So I'll try and remember to put a link to that in the description as well. But I think it's fairly self-explanatory. You'd have to kind of look through STB true types header to get your head around like what these different values are. But once you know what they are, I think this all kind of makes sense. The kind of magic bit that we're using out of STB true types down here is make code point bitmap business is where we say like, and then go and write into the right part of our atlas image the character in this font. And then you can see us here saving all of the data back out to the character map. But yeah, like I say, all relatively simple. We're going to have to wait and see now. So I think next steps are actually wiring this in to the renderer. So currently it's still not using it. So to look at our notes here, we're generating the font atlas. I think the next thing to do is to make a texture resource for this, which might take a little thinking because it's not an RGB alpha. like our other textures are. It's a single byte, like one channel image. So I have to see if that makes life any harder. And then there's the fun bit, which is working out how to actually use that information in our shader. I think my kind of naive thought is we just glob it into the existing shader, and what you have is a sampler that will draw the quad and a separate sampler that would draw the font, potentially. But that might be silly. We might want to make them completely mutually exclusive from each other. It means it might end up being a separate shader that we run like one after the other. I don't know. I haven't thought about it much. So I think this will be kind of the next chunk, and it's a bit of busy work. And I think the actual like interesting part is probably in here. And then, then we'll be able to draw text. I think there's probably then a bit of like CPU side logic to then work out how we do the layout for a string of text, but all I think quite easy at that point. So yeah, that's the plan for the next chunk. I will have a play on GitHub and work out how I want to do that. Probably it's like a tagged commit that somehow is easily relatable back to the video, is what I have in mind. So if you're interested in any of this, you can go and have a poke. And yeah, either point out my mistakes or maybe learn something. We will see. But hey, I hope that's been interesting. I will catch you in the next one. Take care.